I had just finished my deployment and was dead tired. It had been one of those long, grueling stretches in the field, full of sleepless nights and adrenaline-filled days. But that night, as I made my way back home to Los Angeles, there was an odd sense of calm. I didn't expect to feel anything other than exhaustion, but something in the air was different. The usual rush of excitement to see Natalie, my wife, didn't hit me like it used to. We'd been married for 7 years, high school sweethearts who'd weathered the storms of military life together. We'd made it through the endless deployments, the months of silence, the feeling of being a world apart. She was the anchor that kept me grounded. Or at least that's what I thought. As I parked my car in the driveway, I took a deep breath. The cool night air hit me and I could feel the weariness creeping in. 2 flights, a 6-hour drive, and hours spent fighting to stay awake. It had all been worth it for this moment. The thought of seeing Natalie again, of holding her, even if just for a few hours before I crashed into bed, made the exhaustion bearable. The house was quiet. Too quiet, actually. The only light I could see was coming from upstairs, from our bedroom. I smiled, imagining her still awake, maybe reading a book or just waiting for me. But something felt off. I shook it off. I was tired. I grabbed my duffel bag and walked up the stairs, boots thumping softly against the wood. I reached the top and could hear a faint noise coming from our room, muffled voices, whispering. At first, I thought it might just be the TV or maybe she was talking to a friend on the phone, but then I heard a name. Jack. I froze in my tracks. That was not my name. I didn't want to believe what I had just heard. My pulse quickened as I pushed open the bedroom door. The sight that greeted me hit me like a punch to the gut. There, in my bed, was my wife. Naked. Straddling a man I had never seen before. The image was burned into my mind instantly. My heart raced, my breath shallow. I didn't even know what to say at first. My hands shook as I stood in the doorway, staring at the two of them, frozen in shock. Natalie's eyes went wide when she saw me. Her face twisted in panic as she tried to cover herself with a pillow. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You weren't supposed to come home tonight." "Not supposed to come home to my own house?" I finally spoke, my voice calm, eerily calm. My anger was growing, but it hadn't fully surfaced yet. "Not supposed to walk into my own bedroom?" I stepped inside. Jack, the man she was with, scrambled to put on his clothes, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't know," he stammered, trying to find his words. "I didn't know she was married." I scoffed. "You didn't know she was married?" I took a step closer. "The wedding photos all over the house didn't clue you in? Or did you just not care?" Natalie was crying now, mascara streaking down her face. She looked at me with those wide, panicked eyes. "Ryan, please, I can explain. Please." I wasn't interested in explanations. "Explain what, Natalie? That you've been lying to me for the last 6 months? That you've been sleeping with this man in our bed while I've been away?" I shook my head, trying to hold back the rage that threatened to explode. "How long, Natalie? How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, wiping tears from her cheeks. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of video calls where she had smiled and told me she missed me, while secretly waiting for the next time Jack would show up at our door. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, shattered in an instant. My mind screamed, but my body remained still. Cold. Controlled. Jack, now fully dressed, tried to back away. I'm just going to go," he said, his voice shaky, desperate. "No," I said firmly, not letting him move. "You're not going anywhere until we talk about what happens next." I saw his hand reach for the nightstand. For the drawer. "Don't," I warned. But he didn't listen. His hand came back up, gripping a gun. My own gun, the one I kept locked in the drawer for emergencies. My heart skipped a beat. This idiot was about to pull a weapon on me. "Stay back," Jack shouted, his voice cracking. "I'll shoot. I swear to God I'll shoot." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I'd faced worse in the field. Gunmen who knew what they were doing, insurgents who would shoot on sight without hesitation. But this guy? He was an amateur. A scared one. "You're going to shoot me," I said quietly, my eyes narrowing. "In my own house. With my wife as a witness." I tilted my head slightly, assessing the situation. "Do you even know how to use that thing? Your grip is terrible, your stance is garbage, and your finger is too close to the trigger. I could disarm you in 2 seconds, break both your arms before you even think about pulling that trigger." Jack's face went red, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. His hand trembled even more. "Put it down, Jack," I said coldly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Please, just let me go," he pleaded. It took me exactly 1.3 seconds to close the distance between us. Before he could even blink, I trapped his wrist, twisted the gun away from him, and applied pressure to a nerve cluster under his thumb. The Glock fell to the floor with a loud clatter. Jack yelped in pain as I shoved him to the ground, face first. "Here's the thing about pulling guns on people," I said, my voice calm and controlled as if I were explaining a lesson to a child. "You really should know what you're doing. You could have shot your girlfriend. You could have shot yourself. But you definitely couldn't have shot me." Morgan screamed from behind me, "Let him go, Ryan. You're hurting him." "Yeah," I said, applying a bit more pressure. "I am. And I'm going to keep hurting him until we establish some ground rules." I leaned down to whisper in his ear. "Rule 1, you don't ever come near my wife again. Rule 2, you don't call her, text her, email her, or communicate with her in any way. Rule 3, if I ever see you again, what I'm doing right now will feel like a massage compared to what comes next. Are we clear?" "Yes," Jack choked out, his voice trembling. "Yes, I swear I won't." I released him. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his arm as if it had been broken. He grabbed his clothes and rushed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Natalie stood there, still clutching the bedsheet around her, her face streaked with tears. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I didn't answer her. Not yet. I turned and grabbed my duffel bag from the hallway, heading toward the guest room. "Get dressed," I said coldly. "Sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we talk about lawyers." Her voice cracked. "Lawyers? Ryan, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this." "No," I said firmly without turning around. "You had 6 months to think about counseling. 6 months to decide if this marriage was worth saving. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." And with that, I locked myself in my office, my mind racing. My marriage was over. The life I thought I had, the trust one thought we'd built, was a lie. And tomorrow, everything would begin to change. I wasn't just going to let this slide. They weren't going to get away with this. Not if I had anything to say about it. The night felt endless. I couldn't sleep, not after what had just happened. My body, exhausted from weeks of constant work in the field, was physically drained, but my mind? It wouldn't shut down. The images of Natalie and Jack in our bed kept replaying over and over, like a loop I couldn't escape. I hadn't expected it. I had never, in 1,000 lifetimes, imagined that this could happen to me. I sat in my home office, the darkness of the room only broken by the soft glow of my laptop. The hum of the house was too quiet. In the silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and relentless. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I began to type out an email to my commander, requesting an extension on my leave for a personal emergency. I needed time to get my head straight, but I also needed to prepare for what was coming next. I wasn't a man who ran from problems. I didn't hide from conflict. I faced things head-on, controlled every room I entered, every situation I was in. But this was different. This wasn't some battlefield where life and death hung in the balance. This was my life. This was my wife, my marriage, my trust. It had all been shattered in an instant. When the email was sent, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, trying to push the thoughts of betrayal aside. I had to focus. I had to plan. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of Nicholas Jensen, a divorce attorney I'd used in the past for a few legal matters. He answered on the first ring. "Ryan," he said, his voice as calm and direct as always. "What's going on?" "I caught her," I said flatly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Natalie. She's been cheating on me for 6 months. And now her lover pulled a gun on me." There was a brief silence on the other end before Nicholas spoke again, his voice serious. "I'm coming over first thing tomorrow. We'll get this handled." I hung up without another word. There was nothing more to say. What was left to say, really? The facts were clear. I could already see the path ahead of me. I was going to take back control of my life. By the time the sun began to rise, I had already made a decision. I wouldn't make this easy for Natalie. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without consequences. She wasn't going to get sympathy from me, and she sure as hell wasn't going to manipulate me into thinking we could fix things. She made her choice and now I was going to make mine. The following morning, I woke up early not because I was well rested, I hadn't slept, but because I had things to do. I dressed quickly, throwing on a simple t-shirt and jeans, before heading down to the kitchen. I knew Natalie was still in the guest room. She hadn't come to me, hadn't even tried to speak to me after last night. I wasn't surprised. I made coffee, the ritual mindless, but in the quiet of the kitchen, it felt like the calm before a storm. Every sip I took seemed to ground me further, to remind me that this wasn't about anger anymore. This was about action. This was about rebuilding my life, and cutting ties with the woman who had just shattered everything I had built. Natalie appeared around 7:30, her eyes puffy and red from crying. She hesitated in the doorway of the kitchen, not daring to move forward. I didn't look up. I just kept stirring my coffee, the silence between us palpable. "I know you're angry," she said softly, her voice fragile. "But please, Ryan, can we talk? Please. I'm so sorry." I put the spoon down and turned to face her. "Sorry?" I repeated, my voice low and controlled. "Is that what you think this is? A simple apology fixes everything?" Her face crumpled as she stepped closer, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said coldly. "You've had 6 months to think about this. 6 months to decide whether or not you wanted to keep your vows. You chose him. Not me." Her lips trembled. "Ryan, please, I love you. I made a mistake." I shook my head. "No, Natalie. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. A choice to betray me. A choice to lie to me for half a year while I was overseas. Do you know how many nights I spent lying awake thinking about you? Wondering if you were okay? You knew all of that and you still chose him." Her face was pale now, her body shaking. "I didn't know what else to do. You were always gone. I was alone." "Alone?" I cut in. "We've been through this before, Natalie. You knew what you were getting into when you married me. You knew the sacrifices. You knew what this life would be like. If you were unhappy, you should have told me. You didn't. You chose to sneak around behind my back." I let the words hang in the air, thick and sharp. The reality was that it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. The trust was gone. I could see the panic in her eyes, the desperation, but it didn't sway me. Not anymore. She wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, then looked at me, her voice breaking. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you." I met her gaze without blinking. "You did. You chose this. Now we're done. I've already contacted a lawyer. Nicholas Jensen. He'll be here at 10 o'clock. We'll sort out the divorce, divide assets, and you'll sign whatever he puts in front of you." "Ryan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said, my tone final. "It's already done. I'm done." At exactly 10 a.m. Nicholas arrived. I greeted him at the door, shaking his hand firmly. He was a man of few words, professional and efficient, the kind of person who got things done without the emotional baggage. He walked into the living room and immediately set up his laptop on the coffee table. "Mr. Thompson," he said, looking at me, "we'll handle this quickly and cleanly. I've already drafted the paperwork for the divorce, and we'll get this settled in no time." I nodded. "Just make sure she gets the message. No more games. No more lies. This ends today." When Natalie finally entered the room, she was in her robe, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked at me, then at Nicholas, who was already laying out the divorce papers. "Mrs. Thompson," Nicholas said, his voice smooth but direct, "we're here to facilitate the division of assets and finalize the divorce. My client, Mr. Thompson, has already made it clear that he wants this process to be as swift and painless as possible. I'd advise your full cooperation." Her eyes darted to me, full of panic. "Please, Ryan. We can fix this. We can work through it. I love you." "I'm sorry," I said coldly, the words coming easily now. "You had your chance to fix it. You made your choice and now I'm making mine." Her lips trembled as she looked at the papers in front of her. There was no going back now. The life we'd built, the love we'd shared, was a thing of the past. "Sign them," I told her firmly, "and walk away." The next hour felt like a blur. Natalie signed everything Nicholas put in front of her, her hand shaking with every stroke of the pen. There was no anger left in me. There was nothing but cold resolution. By the time we were done, the divorce papers were finalized and everything between us had come to an official end. The life I thought I would have with her, my high school sweetheart, the woman I had trusted and loved, was now nothing more than a painful memory. As I watched her leave, I didn't feel relief, not yet. But I knew I had done what I needed to do. The hardest part was behind me. Now I could finally start moving forward. The days following the divorce were a haze. I kept busy, throwing myself into work, the only thing that seemed to provide any semblance of stability. But even in the middle of all that, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was off. The betrayal was still fresh, still raw. I had never expected this. Sure, I knew the risks of being a soldier, the long hours away from home, the separation from family. I thought I had prepared for everything. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I walked in and found Natalie with another man. I hadn't just lost my wife. I had lost the image of the life I thought I knew. As the hours passed, my thoughts became increasingly focused on one thing: how to move forward. And how to make sure that Natalie and her lover Jack didn't just walk away without any consequences. The next day I called a few old friends from the military. Steve Hansen, one of the guys I'd served with, had been like a brother to me for years. He had always been the one I turned to in times like this, even though I hated to admit I needed help. I called him up and asked him to meet me at a cafe just outside of town. When he walked in, his usual easy grin faded as soon as he saw my face. "Damn man," he said, taking a seat across from me. "What happened?" "Found her," I said flatly. "Found her with another guy. In our bed. 6 months of lies." Steve's jaw tightened as he leaned back in his chair. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I really am. But that guy, Jack, you said he pulled a gun on you?" I nodded, my eyes steely. "Yeah, he did. In my own house. The bastard thought he could threaten me and get away with it." "Did you?" "I didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking," I interrupted. "But I disarmed him. I made sure he knew exactly who he was dealing with." Steve leaned in closer, his expression deadly serious. "You're gonna make them pay, right? Not just walk away from this and let it be?" I leaned back in my seat, rubbing my hands over my face. "I'm not letting this slide, Steve. I'm going to make damn sure they both understand the consequences of what they did." "I've got your back," Steve said, his voice low and unwavering. "You need anything, you let me know. But man, this isn't gonna be easy." The next few days felt like a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Nicholas Jensen, my attorney, worked quickly. He was efficient, a bulldog in a suit. As soon as I'd signed the divorce papers, he filed everything with the court, and things started moving fast. But it wasn't just about getting the divorce finalized. I wanted to make sure that Jack, the man who had pulled a gun on me, faced consequences for what he did. And Natalie? She wasn't going to get away with this unscathed either. I didn't waste any time. I had Steve helping me gather everything I could on Jack. I knew he had a record. I knew the man was a mess, but I didn't know how deep it went until Steve came through with a background check. When Steve met with me at the cafe a few days later, he slid a thick folder across the table. "Here," he said, his tone low. "Everything you need to know about Jack. You were right, he's got a record." I opened the folder, scanning through the pages. There it was. Jack wasn't just some random guy. He was a convicted felon with multiple arrests under his belt. DUIs, assault charges, the works. But what really stood out to me was the probation violation. He had a history with firearms and he wasn't supposed to have one, especially not the Glock he pulled on me. I couldn't help the grim smile that crept onto my face. This was the leverage I needed. The following week, I was back in the office with Nicholas, laying out my plan. "Jack's got a criminal record," I said, showing Nicholas the file Steve had provided. "And not just any record, he's on probation for firearms possession. If I push this, if I bring up the gun he pointed at me, it'll violate his probation. That's jail time." Nicholas nodded slowly, scrolling through the documents. "This is exactly what we needed. If we push this, Jack will have no leg to stand on. Not only did he break his probation, but he also used that illegal firearm to threaten you. This could end his freedom, Ryan." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I want him to feel the consequences. I want him to lose everything. He doesn't get to walk away from this. Nicholas smiled coldly. "We'll make sure of that." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering. Nicholas filed a formal complaint against Jack, requesting that the court revoke his probation due to the firearm violation. We submitted the police report from the night of the incident, complete with photos of the weapon that had been confiscated. Jack had no idea what was coming for him. Meanwhile, things at home with Natalie were quiet, too quiet. She hadn't tried to reach out to me, not directly. But I knew she was struggling. She had no idea that I was gathering evidence against Jack. And she had no idea how far I was willing to go to make sure she didn't walk away from this unscathed. Then, just as things seemed to be settling into a rhythm, I got a message from Steve. It was a photo taken from across the street. I squinted at the image, then my stomach sank. It was Jack's apartment. And parked in front of it was none other than Natalie's car. Steve's text followed quickly. "Want me to keep tabs?" I felt the anger bubble up again, but I kept my face neutral. "Yeah, let me know what you see." 2 days later, I had confirmation. Natalie had moved in with Jack. 48 hours after our divorce was finalized, she had already packed her bags and shacked up with the man who had destroyed my life. Part of me was disgusted. But another part of me felt something else: satisfaction. She wasn't going to get away with this. Not with me, not with anyone. The next move was mine. The following weeks felt like a slow, deliberate march toward something inevitable. As I sat in my office late one evening, the city lights outside reflecting off my desk, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. My mind constantly raced back to Natalie and Jack. The betrayal still felt raw, but there was something different now. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. About making sure I walked away with my dignity intact, and making sure they didn't get away with what they had done. Steve had been keeping an eye on Natalie, sending me updates on her movements. The fact that she had moved in with Jack didn't surprise me. It was almost too perfect, too predictable. After everything that had happened, she had chosen him, the man who had pulled a gun on me in my own home. A man with a criminal record. The fact that she had jumped so quickly into his arms after our divorce didn't make her look like a victim. It made her look reckless. And that was something I was going to use against her. I didn't want revenge, not in the emotional sense. I wanted justice. And there was a difference. The next morning, I walked into Nicholas's office, the weight of everything still pressing down on my shoulders. When I sat down across from him, I didn't need to say anything. He could tell by the look in my eyes that I was ready to take things to the next level. "We've got to move fast," I said, my voice steady. "Jack's not just a random guy. I've learned more about him in the past week than I ever wanted to know. He's not only a criminal, he's a liability." Nicholas nodded, already anticipating what I was about to say. "I've been reviewing the details. If we push this hard enough, we can get him arrested for the probation violation. His past is going to catch up to him." I leaned forward, my hands clasped in front of me. "I want him behind bars. I want Natalie to see him for what he really is. I want her to understand that the man she left me for, he's nothing. He's a criminal, he's unstable, and he's going to lose everything." "Leave it to me," Nicholas said with a sharp smile. "I'll take it from here." It didn't take long for things to start moving. A few days later, I received a call from Nicholas. "We've filed the formal motion. The court is already reviewing Jack's probation violation. The evidence we've gathered should be enough to put him back in jail." I felt a cold sense of satisfaction run through me. Good. Let's make sure it sticks. As the weeks went on, I watched as the walls slowly closed in on Jack. Nicholas had pulled every string he could. From witness statements to the police report that confirmed the weapon had been illegal for Jack to possess, everything pointed toward his downfall. Jack, it seemed, had no idea what was coming for him. But I did. And that was the only thing that mattered. Then the unexpected happened. I got a text from Steve one morning that shook me to my core. It was a video. I hesitated before opening it, but then my curiosity won out. As I watched, my stomach sank. The video showed Jack outside his apartment, clearly agitated. He was on the phone with someone, pacing back and forth. His voice was low but frantic. "This is a nightmare," Jack said, his voice cracking with panic. "I can't believe she's doing this to me. She's going to ruin everything." I couldn't make out the person on the other end of the line, but Jack's words were clear. "She can't do this. I'm already in deep. I didn't sign up for this. It wasn't supposed to be like this." The video ended and my mind raced. What was he talking about? Who was he on the phone with? I sent Steve a quick reply. "What's going on? What's he talking about?" Steve's response came quickly. "I've got a guy who's been watching Jack. Says he's involved in some shady stuff. Not just criminal activity, money laundering, dealing with some unsavory people. Jack's way in over his head." I could feel the anger in my chest flare up again. Not only had Jack been an idiot in sleeping with my wife, but it seemed he was tangled up in something far worse. This wasn't just a man who had made a mistake. This was someone who had made a life of bad choices. And now his actions were about to ruin him. That afternoon, I met with Nicholas again. "Jack's in deeper than we thought," I said, sliding the video across the table. "We've got him for the gun. But I think there's more. I want to know what we can do to use this to our advantage." Nicholas raised an eyebrow as he watched the video. "This changes things. If he's involved in illegal activities, money laundering, connections to other criminals, that could be used to pressure him into a plea deal. This could bring him down for more than just the probation violation." "Exactly," I said, my voice hard. "He's not just a petty criminal. He's a liability. I want to make sure this whole thing explodes in his face." Nicholas nodded slowly. "I'll make a few calls. We'll dig deeper into his activities. If we can tie him to more serious crimes, it'll give us the leverage we need to bury him." Days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, I watched as Jack's life unraveled. His criminal connections began to surface, and the more we learned, the more I realized how lucky I had been to escape unscathed. Then came the day I had been waiting for. Nicholas called me into his office again, his tone businesslike. "It's done," he said, a rare smile on his face. "Jack's facing serious charges. The probation violation alone could have landed him in jail for 6 months. But with everything else we've uncovered, money laundering, connections to a few dangerous people, it's only a matter of time before he's completely off the grid. The judge is going to throw the book at him." I sat back in my chair, a wave of cold satisfaction washing over me. "What about Natalie?" I asked, my voice distant. "What happens with her?" Nicholas leaned forward, his expression neutral. "She's not getting off easy either. She's been complicit in all of this, whether she knows it or not. She'll face the consequences of her actions soon enough. As for Jack, well, he's going to wish he'd never crossed you." The next few days were a whirlwind. Jack was arrested, his involvement in a money laundering ring exposed for all to see. The police and the court system moved quickly. In the end, he was sentenced to several years in prison for the crimes he had committed, both for the gun incident and his deeper criminal ties. Natalie? She faded into the background, her life spinning out of control. Her reputation had been destroyed, not just because of the affair, but because of the man she had chosen to be with. As for me, I walked away from all of it. I had lost everything I thought I knew. But in the end, I had regained something far more important: control. And that was enough. The months that followed Jack's arrest felt surreal. There were no grand victories, no sense of triumph in seeing the man who had been part of my betrayal locked away. No, instead there was only an eerie quiet. I had expected more, expected to feel a rush of satisfaction or perhaps a sense of closure, but in truth, it felt like a weight had been lifted, even though I knew that weight would always linger. It was strange, standing in my home, knowing that the life I thought I'd built had crumbled around me. I had spent years thinking that a strong marriage was the foundation of everything, that it would hold steady despite the distance, despite the danger, despite the chaos of military life. And yet it hadn't. My trust in Natalie had been shattered in an instant, and now nothing was the same. I didn't look back much. At least not consciously. There were moments, though, quiet moments in the middle of the night, in the space between thoughts, when memories of her crept in. Of us, together, laughing, holding each other through tough times. But those memories were quickly swallowed up by the realization that they were built on a lie. A lie that I had allowed myself to believe. Steve checked in on me from time to time. He'd been a constant throughout all of this, and I knew I could count on him. He was the one person who didn't sugarcoat things. He didn't try to tell me everything was going to be okay when it wasn't. He simply understood. "Got a minute?" he asked, walking into my office one afternoon as casual as ever. "Always for you, man," I said, nodding to the chair across from me. "What's up?" Steve took a seat, his face more serious than usual. "I've been keeping an eye on things, making sure Jack doesn't try anything else dumb. But it's more than that." I raised an eyebrow. "What's more than that?" "I don't know if you've heard from anyone, but word's gotten around. People in your old circle, some of the guys from the unit, they're talking. About Natalie. About how she left you, how she moved in with Jack, and then how he got arrested. Some of them are pissed. They know what she did to you. And they don't exactly have sympathy for her." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of Steve's words settling in. I hadn't given much thought to how others saw the situation. I hadn't wanted to really. But the reality was, people talked. And people had opinions. "I don't care what people think," I said, my voice firm. "She made her bed. Let her lie in it." Steve nodded, understanding. "I get it. But just know, man, you're not alone in this. People know what she did. You're not the bad guy here." That was all I needed to hear. I hadn't really cared about the opinions of others. What mattered was the truth. And the truth was, I had done everything right. I had been loyal, I had trusted her, and she had betrayed me in the worst way. And now, as strange as it sounded, I was at peace with it. I wasn't going to let her mistakes drag me down. It was over, and I was moving forward. A few weeks later, I received a call from Nicholas. "Ryan, I've got something for you." I sat up straighter, sensing the gravity in his voice. "What is it?" "You were right about Natalie. She's not exactly moving on," he said. "I've been doing some digging, and it turns out she's trying to contest the divorce. She's hired a new attorney, a guy named Bill Anderson. The usual kind, ambulance chaser. She's claiming duress, saying she was emotionally unstable when she signed the divorce papers." I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. "Is she serious?" "Very," Nicholas replied. "She's trying to get the terms of the divorce overturned. Wants a second chance at the assets, maybe even some spousal support." It's a weak case, but she's not letting this go without a fight. I clenched my fists, trying to remain calm. I had expected her to try something like this. In fact, it was almost predictable. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate the situation any further. Is it worth fighting? I asked. Absolutely, Nicholas replied. We've got her. The agreement was signed under her full knowledge. The emotional duress claim won't hold up in court. She's just trying to play the victim. I thought for a moment. I could see what Natalie was doing. She wasn't ready to face the consequences of her actions. She wasn't ready to admit that she'd chosen a life with a criminal, that she'd thrown away everything we had for nothing. I had to make sure she faced it, once and for all. The next few days were filled with more legal back and forth. I knew what I needed to do and I was ready for the fight. But as Nicholas worked on the case, something else started to happen. The longer I spent reflecting on everything, the more I realized how little I cared about what Natalie did next. Sure, I wanted her to face the consequences, but my mind was beginning to shift. I was tired of the drama. I didn't want to keep dragging this out. I wanted to focus on myself, on my life, and on moving forward. I started running again, long, hard runs early in the morning, pushing myself to clear my mind. I had always used physical exertion as a way to deal with stress, but this felt different. With each step, the weight of the past seemed to lift, even if just a little. I didn't need to be angry anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. All I needed to do was reclaim what was mine. My peace of mind, my happiness, my future. Then one day as I was out for a run, I got a call from Steve. Ryan, he said, his voice almost gleeful. I've got news. What now? I asked, knowing this wouldn't be another casual check-in. I was just talking to someone who's been keeping tabs on Natalie. Looks like she's moved out of Jack's place. Apparently, things went south between them fast. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart racing. What do you mean, went south? Jack's facing more charges. He got caught up in something bigger, something he couldn't talk his way out of. He's looking at serious prison time now. And Natalie? Steve's voice dropped. She's been trying to make excuses for her choices. But people are talking. And she's been making calls, asking for help. She's alone now. A strange feeling crept through me. I didn't feel happy or vindicated. I just felt exhausted. Good luck to her, I said quietly. She made her bed. Let her lie in it. It didn't matter what Natalie did next. It didn't matter what Jack did either. What mattered was the life I was rebuilding. Slowly but surely I was putting the pieces together. There was no magic moment where everything felt right again. But day by day I was finding my way. I was moving on. And that was enough. The months that followed felt like a transition. It wasn't instant. It wasn't dramatic. But I felt the shift, subtle yet undeniable. Every day I moved a little further away from the past, from the chaos, from the heartbreak. It wasn't that I was over it all at once, because I wasn't. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened, but about learning to live with it. To live in a way that wasn't consumed by it. My routine became my anchor. I had always been someone who thrived on discipline, whether it was in the military or in my personal life. Now I poured my energy into things that mattered. I started training for a marathon. I had always loved running, but now it became something more. A way to clear my head, to reclaim my sense of control. I ran for hours each week, pushing my body further than I thought I could, my feet pounding against the pavement, feeling the rhythm of each step. And slowly life began to feel a little lighter. Then came the day I met Angelica. I had been seeing a few people casually, nothing serious, just coffee, dinners, conversations. But nothing ever stuck. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to get back out there. Then Angelica entered the picture, completely unexpected. It was through mutual friends, Steve and his wife, Marianne. They'd invited me over for a dinner party, and there she was, standing in the kitchen with a glass of wine, laughing at something Steve had said. I noticed her immediately, her energy, her smile, the way she seemed completely in the moment. She wasn't trying to be anyone she wasn't. She was just real. We started talking, the conversation flowing effortlessly between us. She was a nurse at the VA hospital, funny, sharp, and refreshingly down to earth. We had so much in common, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a connection that wasn't tainted by betrayal or anger. We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, and by the end of the night, I had her number. It was casual at first. We went on a couple of dates, nothing too serious. But with each one I found myself drawn to her more. Her ability to laugh at the world, at herself, at the ridiculousness of life. It was exactly what I needed. A few weeks later I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just moving on. I was moving forward. And that was different. Angelica and I spent more time together, getting to know each other in a way I hadn't allowed myself to do in a long time. She was the kind of person who brought out the best in me. When I was with her, I wasn't thinking about Natalie or Jack. I wasn't holding on to past hurts. I was just present. I took her on hikes, we had lazy Sundays cooking breakfast together. It felt easy, comfortable, healthy. And it felt real, something I had almost forgotten how to experience. Then, one night, after a particularly nice evening out, Angelica and I ended up sitting on the porch of my new house. It was late, the cool breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. She was curled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax completely. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," she said softly, her fingers tracing the edge of my hand. I turned my head to look at her. "What do you mean?" She smiled, that easy, natural smile that made everything feel like it would be okay. After everything I've been through, I never thought I'd meet someone who made me feel like this, like I could trust them, like I could be myself." I felt a lump form in my throat. In all the years of heartbreak, in all the struggles, I had forgotten what it was like to feel completely at ease with another person. It wasn't something I had expected, especially not after everything with Natalie. But Angelica, she made it feel possible. "I'm glad you did," I said quietly. By the time the holidays rolled around, things had progressed quickly between Angelica and me. We were a team in every sense of the word. We spent Thanksgiving at my house, cooking together, sharing stories with friends. It felt so different from the holidays I'd spent alone in the past. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was truly living. One evening in December, after a long day at work, Angelica and I were sitting in front of the fireplace, the soft crackling sound filling the space. I turned to her, my heart full, and in that moment, I knew what I had to do. "Angelica," I began, my voice steady but full of emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want you in it. I've spent so much time running from the past, from everything that happened. But with you, I feel like I can finally stop running. I don't want to be the guy who holds on to old pain anymore. I want to build something real, something good. With you." Her eyes softened and she reached for my hand. "Ryan," she whispered, "I feel the same way. You've shown me what real trust and connection looks like. I don't need anything else. Just you." It was simple and it was everything. The next day I took Angelica to the park. We sat on the grass, enjoying the rare California winter sun. The whole world seemed to slow down around us. And that's when I asked her the question I had been holding in my heart for so long. "Angelica, will you marry me?" Her eyes went wide, then softened with a smile that lit up her entire face. Yes, I will." In that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't carrying the weight of the past anymore. I had let go of the hurt, the betrayal. I had found something new, something real, and I was ready to move forward. In the months that followed, we planned our wedding. It wasn't a big affair, just something simple. Family, friends, people who had supported me through everything. And when the day finally arrived, I stood at the altar with Angelica, holding her hands, knowing that this was the beginning of the rest of my life. The man I had been, the man who had lost everything, who had been broken by the one person he trusted most, was gone. In his place stood a man who had rebuilt himself from the ground up. A man who had learned that there was always a way forward, no matter how hard the road seemed. And as Angelica and I exchanged vows, I realized that the best part of all of it wasn't the revenge or the justice. It was the love I had found again, this time in a way that was pure, that was honest, and that was all mine. Life, as I had come to realize, had a strange way of balancing itself out. Sometimes, it came in the form of a slow, inevitable turn toward healing, as if the universe had decided to give me a break. Other times, it hit harder than I ever expected. But through it all, I had learned that the past, while powerful and often painful, didn't have to define the future. The future was mine to create, piece by piece, with every decision I made moving forward. But no matter how much I told myself I was moving on, there were moments when the past would come rushing back, when I'd feel a brief pang of loss, or when I'd catch a glimpse of something familiar and realize it was gone for good. I couldn't entirely shut out the memories, but I had learned how to live with them. I was no longer defined by them. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring when I realized how much had changed. Angelica and I had spent the morning at the farmer's market, picking out fresh produce, laughing over the quirky little stands. It was the kind of weekend I had always hoped for, simple, joyful, and full of promise. When we got home, we unpacked the groceries together, sharing little jokes and stories along the way. As I put away the fresh herbs in the kitchen, my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't recognize the number, but something about it made me pick it up. Hello. I answered, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Ryan. A familiar voice crackled through the line. I froze. It was Natalie. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. The anger, the betrayal, it all rushed back like a tidal wave. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my mind racing. Ryan, are you there? Natalie's voice was shaky, almost pleading. Please, I need to talk to you. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of the past hovering over me. Why now, Natalie? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. After everything, after all that happened, you think you can just call me up like nothing's wrong? I don't know how to say this, she stammered. I made a huge mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I messed up everything and I regret it. I regret leaving you. I know I can't take it all back, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've been trying to figure out what to do with my life and I just keep coming back to you. I didn't know whether to feel angry, relieved, or something else entirely. Part of me had wanted her to reach out, to admit she was wrong, to acknowledge the hurt she'd caused. But now that it was happening, all I felt was nothing. A hollow emptiness. Sorry? I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. You left me, Natalie. You left me for a man who put a gun to my face, and you think sorry is enough? After everything? There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her choking back tears. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know what I'm asking for, honestly. You're asking for a second chance, right? I cut her off. Let me make something clear, Natalie. I don't want anything from you. Not now, not ever. I've moved on. And I'm not going back to that place. Not for you, not for anyone. I let the words hang there for a moment, letting her absorb the weight of what I was saying. I'm married now, I continued. I've built a life. A real one. With someone who actually cares about me. And I'm not looking back. Her breath hitched. I could hear her try to hold back her emotions, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I understand, she whispered, and then after a long pause, I'm sorry, Ryan. Truly. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I just stood there, my mind processing everything. The hurt, the betrayal, the years spent in a relationship that was based on nothing but lies. I had spent so long trying to hold on to something that wasn't even real. And now I was finally free. I wish you the best, I said finally, my voice steady. Goodbye, Natalie. Before she could say another word, I ended the call. I stood in the kitchen for a few moments, just listening to the faint hum of the house around me. The silence was different now. It wasn't oppressive, it was peaceful. I had finally let go. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe easy. When I turned back around, Angelica was standing in the doorway watching me. Her face was gentle, understanding. Are you okay? She asked softly. I smiled at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. I just needed to get something off my chest. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around me, and I held her tight. This was the life I had chosen. The life that felt real, full of love, stability, and trust. The past was gone, and the future was waiting, full of possibilities. The next few months passed in a blur of new beginnings. Angelica and I settled into a rhythm. We were building a life together, a life where I wasn't haunted by the past. We spent weekends with friends, got to know each other's families better, and found new hobbies we both enjoyed. She introduced me to a new world, one of calm, balance, and contentment. I also made peace with the parts of my past that still lingered. The anger, the resentment, the questions that had kept me up at night, they didn't have the hold over me they once did. I wasn't running from it anymore. I had faced it head-on, and I had come out the other side stronger. And as we planned our future together, I realized something important. True healing wasn't just about moving forward. It was about embracing who I had become through all of the pain, the loss, and the growth. I was no longer the man I had been. I was better for it. The day we got married was simple but beautiful. It wasn't the grand affair I had imagined years ago, but it was everything I needed. Surrounded by close friends and family, I stood next to Angelica, holding her hand as we exchanged vows. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about the past. I was focused only on the moment, on the promise we were making to each other. I promised to love you, to support you, and to grow with you, I said, my voice steady, filled with certainty. And I promise to always be here, Angelica replied, her voice soft but strong. To choose you every day in every way. As we kissed, I knew without a doubt that this was the beginning of something that would last. I had rebuilt my life, brick by brick, and now I was building a future with someone who truly cared for me. I had lost a lot, but I had gained something far more valuable: love, trust, and a second chance at happiness. The weeks following our wedding passed in a whirlwind of joy and excitement. Angelica and I settled into married life with ease, our routines blending into one harmonious rhythm. The house that once felt too empty, too full of echoes of the past, now felt like a true home. It was quiet, peaceful, and exactly what I had been searching for all along. Our mornings began with coffee together, a moment of calm before the world sped up around us. I still woke up early, a habit from my days in the service, but now I had someone to share that quiet space with. We talked about everything and nothing, what we wanted for the future, the simple things that made us laugh, and the bigger things we were beginning to dream about together. But there were days when the memories would hit me. A stray thought would catch me off guard, or I'd see something that reminded me of what I had lost. And in those moments I would pause, but then I'd look over at Angelica, who would always be there with a soft touch, a smile, or a word of encouragement. She was a steady presence, reminding me that the past didn't define me, that I was no longer the man I had been. I was different now, stronger. I had found my place and I was ready to embrace it fully. One Saturday afternoon, a few months after we had tied the knot, Angelica and I were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warm breeze of spring. It was one of those rare, perfect days when everything felt right in the world. We had no grand plans, just the simple pleasure of being together. "I've been thinking," Angelica said, her voice light but thoughtful as she leaned back in her chair. "Oh," I said, teasing her. "That doesn't sound like good news." She laughed, the sound music to my ears. "Don't worry, it's nothing bad. I was thinking we should maybe start looking for a house. A real one, you know. Something we can settle into for the long haul." My heart skipped a beat. I had been hoping we'd reach this point eventually, but hearing her say it out loud made it feel real. This wasn't just a temporary arrangement anymore. We were building a life together. "I'd love that," I said, squeezing her hand. "We've been talking about this for a while, and I think it's time we make it happen." We spent the rest of the afternoon browsing listings online, imagining what our future home could look like. It felt surreal at times, imagining a life without the weight of the past, without the shadows of betrayal hanging over me. I couldn't help but smile as I looked at Angelica, knowing that whatever house we chose, it would be the foundation of the life we had built together. The process of looking for a house was both exciting and exhausting, but every time we visited a new place I found myself thinking about how much had changed. The homes we toured were beautiful, but they all felt like potential. Potential for us to make them our own, for us to fill them with memories. One evening we visited a house on the outskirts of town, a charming cottage with a sprawling backyard and a wraparound porch. As soon as we walked through the front door, I knew it was the one. The layout was perfect, the light streamed in through the windows, and I could already picture us sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "I think this is it," Angelica said, her voice filled with excitement as she stepped into the living room. "I think you're right," I said, pulling her close. "It's perfect. It's everything we've been looking for." The decision was made. We put in an offer, and after a few weeks of paperwork and negotiation, we were officially homeowners. The house became a symbol of everything we had overcome and everything we were building together. It wasn't just a house, it was a home, a new chapter in our lives. As we settled into our new space, I began to reflect on how much I had grown since everything with Natalie. I had gone from being a man who was broken by betrayal to someone who was standing tall again. I had faced my past head on, but it didn't have control over me anymore. I wasn't running away from it. Instead, I had made peace with it. There were still scars, of course. There were still moments when memories crept in uninvited, reminding me of the pain, the anger, and the confusion. But I had learned not to let them consume me. I had learned that healing wasn't linear. Some days it felt easy, like the wounds had finally healed. Other days it felt like I was back at square one, but that was okay. I had a future ahead of me that was worth fighting for. And now, with Angelica by my side, I felt more certain than ever that everything I had gone through had led me to this moment. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. It was a quiet Sunday morning, a few months after we had moved into our new home. Angelica and I were sitting in the kitchen, sipping our coffee and planning out the week. The house was still new to us, but it felt like it had always been ours. We had already started making small changes, putting up artwork, painting the guest room, planting flowers in the garden. It was starting to feel like our own little world. "So," Angelica said, breaking the silence, "we're hosting Thanksgiving this year, right?" I chuckled. "I thought we were going to keep it small. You know, just a quiet day with a few friends." Well, I've been thinking, she said, her eyes sparkling with that mischievous glint I loved. Maybe it's time to start some traditions. I mean, this is our first holiday here. We should make it special. I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. The thought of Thanksgiving in our new home, surrounded by the people we cared about, felt right. It felt like another step forward, another sign that we were building something lasting. All right, I said, smiling. Let's do it. Let's make this one to remember. As we sat there planning the details, I realized how far I had come. I wasn't the same man who had walked through that door years ago, broken and betrayed. I was someone new now. Someone who had learned to let go of the past and embrace the future. And with Angelica by my side, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. No more running from the past. Only moving forward, hand in hand, into whatever the future had in store. As the days grew shorter and the crispness of autumn settled in, Angelica and I found ourselves in the midst of a new adventure, preparing for our first holiday in our new home. We spent evenings cooking, decorating, and laughing, making our house feel more like a true home every day. There was something magical about the way the house transformed, from a simple structure to a space that was uniquely ours. I had never imagined myself here, not like this. The thought of hosting Thanksgiving in the house that once felt so unfamiliar was overwhelming in the best possible way. I had spent so many years focused on surviving, just getting through each day without falling apart, that I hadn't allowed myself to dream. But now I had found peace. I had found my place. The weekend before Thanksgiving, Angelica and I decided to tackle a project we'd been putting off: the backyard. The garden had been neglected for months, the grass overgrown, the flower beds in desperate need of attention. But to me it was more than just a backyard. It was a blank canvas, a place where we could grow something new together. We spent hours digging, planting, and laughing as we got our hands dirty, creating a small vegetable garden and adding flowers and shrubs that would bloom with the seasons. It was hard work, but it was rewarding. As we stood back to look at our efforts, I felt a sense of accomplishment, something I hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't just about building a home, this was about building a life. What do you think? Angelica asked, wiping the sweat from her brow, her cheeks flushed from the effort. It's perfect, I said, admiring the garden we had brought back to life. Just like everything else. We've made it ours. She grinned, her eyes glowing with pride. I'm glad we're doing this together. As the holidays approached, life seemed to speed up. We finalized plans for Thanksgiving, inviting friends and family to join us for the feast we were so excited to prepare. The house was starting to feel like home in ways that went beyond the physical space. The little details, the way we organized the kitchen, the way we spent mornings planning out our week, felt like the foundation of something much bigger than we had originally imagined. But there were moments too when I still felt a slight twinge of uncertainty. Would I be able to shake off all the years of hurt? Could I really allow myself to be happy without feeling like it was somehow too good to be true? I knew Angelica had been patient with me. She could see the way I sometimes pulled back, the way I hesitated when we spoke about the future. But she never pushed. She was always there, always understanding, always patient. And over time, I began to realize that it wasn't the future that scared me, it was the belief that I didn't deserve this happiness. On Thanksgiving morning, the house was filled with the warmth of family and the delicious scent of food wafting from the kitchen. Angelica was in her element, preparing everything with such ease, making sure each dish was perfect. I moved around the kitchen beside her, trying my best to stay out of her way, though she insisted I help. As we worked, I couldn't help but smile. This is it, huh? I said, glancing around at the table we had set. This is the life we've made. She stopped for a moment, looking around with me, her hand brushing against mine. It's exactly what I wanted. The doorbell rang and I knew it was time. We welcomed our guests, laughing, hugging, and catching up with friends and family. The house filled with warmth, conversation, and the sound of people enjoying each other's company. As I looked around, I saw so much more than just a group of people gathered for a meal. I saw the beginning of something that would last. The kind of life I had once thought was impossible. After the dinner had wound down, the last of the dishes washed and the guests trickling out the door, Angelica and I sat together on the couch, a blanket thrown over our laps as we relaxed. The quiet was a comforting presence. I never thought I'd be here, I said, my voice quiet, almost reflective. Angelica looked at me, her hand resting on mine. Here in this house? Not just here, I said, meeting her gaze. In this life. With you. I didn't know it was possible to feel this at peace, you know? After everything I've been through, after all the pain, I never thought I could build something like this. But now, I can't imagine anything else. She squeezed my hand, her smile warm. "You deserve this, Ryan. You've worked so hard for it. You've built a future with me and it's just beginning." And she was right. Our future wasn't something that had just happened. It was something we were actively building, every single day. The pain of the past wasn't gone, but it was fading, replaced by the strength of what we were creating together. As winter settled in, the house became a cozy refuge, a sanctuary from everything outside. The glow of the fireplace became our nightly ritual, and we spent countless hours together, reading, cooking, talking about our plans for the future. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. But one evening, as I sat alone on the porch, I found myself reflecting on the path I had taken to get here. It hadn't been easy. I had lost so much. I had been betrayed by the person I trusted most. But now, in the quiet of the night, as I looked at the house we had made our own, I understood something crucial. The life I had always dreamed of, this peaceful, content, and loving life, wasn't something that had been handed to me. It was something I had fought for. And in that fight, I had learned something invaluable, that even in the face of pain I could rise, that I could heal, that I could rebuild my life, not by running from the past, but by learning from it and letting go of what didn't serve me. Angelica and I were preparing for the new year, talking about all the things we wanted to accomplish together, the dreams we wanted to chase. As we looked out over the backyard we had worked so hard to transform, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Not just in the house or in the things we had achieved, but in how far we had come, together. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't control me anymore. I had a future ahead, one I was excited to live. And I was no longer walking that path alone. With Angelica by my side, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. The new year arrived quietly, but with it came a renewed sense of possibility. The snow had begun to fall gently outside, coating the world in a soft, peaceful blanket of white. Inside, our home was warm and full of life, laughter echoing through the halls, the smell of freshly brewed coffee in the mornings, and the quiet hum of a life slowly being shaped by the choices we made every day. Angelica and I had begun to think more about the future. We talked about starting a family one day and how we envisioned our lives in the years to come. It was strange to think about how much had changed since I had first walked through the door of our home, how much I had changed. From a man lost in the pain of betrayal to someone who could look forward to the future with hope and excitement. And that was thanks to Angelica, whose patience, understanding, and love had guided me back to myself. We spent that first week of the new year organizing, rearranging, and settling deeper into our new rhythm. It felt like a fresh start, like the first real new beginning I had ever had. And I realized that I had a lot to look forward to. Life wasn't about waiting for things to happen. It was about making things happen. Together. It was during a quiet dinner one evening, when the winter chill pressed against the windows, that Angelica looked up from her plate and said, "Ryan, I've been thinking. You've been through a lot, more than anyone should ever have to go through. And I know that sometimes it's hard to let go of the past. But you've done it. You've really let it go." I paused, mid-bite, glancing up at her. "I've tried," I said, putting my fork down. "It hasn't always been easy. But every day it gets a little better." Angelica's gaze softened, and she took my hand across the table. "It's not just about letting go, Ryan. It's about understanding how much stronger you've become. I'm so proud of you. Proud of what you've built, what you've overcome. And proud of the man you are today." I felt a lump in my throat. The words she said were something I had never fully allowed myself to hear. She wasn't just proud of what I had done, she was proud of who I had become. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe it. "I wouldn't have been able to do it without you," I said, my voice low. "You've been the one who kept me grounded. The one who made me believe I could still have a future. I never thought I'd be here, Angelica. But with you, I'm beginning to see that I can be." Her eyes sparkled and she smiled gently, squeezing my hand. "We've built this together. And together we'll build everything that's still to come." That evening after dinner we sat in the living room, the soft light of the fireplace flickering in the background. Angelica curled up next to me and we talked about our dreams, big and small. We talked about travel, about maybe moving to a bigger house one day, about our future children and what kind of parents we wanted to be. The world felt vast and full of potential, but for the first time, it wasn't intimidating. It was exciting. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" Angelica asked, her voice thoughtful. I nodded, thinking back to everything, the betrayal, the pain, the struggle to rebuild. "Yeah," I said. "I think about it sometimes. How much I've changed. I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could find peace again. And now you have." "I have," I agreed, a smile tugging at my lips. "And I have you to thank for that." You've shown me what it means to trust again. What it means to truly be loved. The next few months passed quickly. We focused on our careers, on growing together as a couple, and on laying the groundwork for the future. Angelica took on a leadership role at her hospital, which meant long hours, but I was always there to support her, just as she had supported me. I threw myself into work too, but now it felt like it had purpose. And still we continued to build our home. The garden flourished, our new home becoming a symbol of everything we had accomplished. We had our ups and downs, every couple does, but we learned how to navigate them. When disagreements arose, we faced them with open communication, with patience, and with a resolve to always work things out. I had learned that love wasn't just about being there when things were easy, it was about showing up when things were hard and supporting each other through it all. One evening, as we sat on the porch, the stars above us shining brightly, I found myself reflecting on everything that had brought me to this point. It had taken years of struggle, of heartache to get here, but now that I was here, I could finally say that I was at peace. I never thought I could have this, I said, looking at Angelica, who sat beside me, her head resting on my shoulder. A life like this. She smiled softly, her hand resting on mine. And now you do, she said simply. You've earned it. I nodded, my heart full. We've earned it. As spring began to bloom, Angelica and I took the next step in our journey together. We started making plans to start a family, having conversations about how we wanted to raise our children, what kind of parents we wanted to be. It felt natural. It felt right. The road ahead was long and there would be challenges, no doubt. But as we sat in our garden, watching the flowers bloom, I knew that whatever came our way, we would face it together. I had survived the worst moments of my life. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes, piece by piece, and now I was stronger. I was happy. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, one full of love, trust, and possibility. And I couldn't wait to see what came next.